Distinguished guests at the head table, regents, chancellors, administrative officers, faculty, students, alumni, and friends of UCLA. You saw this morning that we are in a time of change. And it's a change that we all have to face up to and meet and deal with. Certainly, your presiding officer here today is no exception. And that is why I interrupt you now, in the interests of time, in the interests of going forward with this program that we have planned for you and the additional parts of it in an orderly and expeditious way. While we reflect upon our meal, and this is not going to be as lighthearted perhaps as we had hoped it might be, but while we're reflecting upon our meal and our champagne and our position and our presence here today, we should, I think, reflect very deeply upon the profound remarks that Chancellor Young made this morning in terms of self-analysis, self-renewal, individually and for our institutions. I'm going to take this time now in honor of UCLA's 50th birthday to this day and the privilege that the Alumni Association has to host this luncheon, to make certain introductions to you and to welcome you all to this 50th birthday party for UCLA. At the head table, I want to introduce to you some people who will not speak to you later on in the program. Good friends of yours and UCLA, not necessarily in a particular order of priority. Again, because I didn't have the seating arrangement until a minute ago, but in an order nevertheless. The first man in the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, and we're making no distinction between the sexes, you'll observe. The first man in the United States Department of Health, Education, and Welfare and the Secretary of that department, former Lieutenant Governor and Regent, our own Bob Finch. Bob. Welcome back. We miss you. The First Lady of the University of California, Mrs. Charles J. Hitch. Nancy. The First Lady of UCLA, Mrs. Charles E. Young. Sue. The First Lady of the UCLA Academic Senate, Mrs. Lowell J. Page. Betty Page. The First Lady of our distinguished Vice Chancellor of Administration at UCLA, Mrs. James W. Hobson. Certainly the First Lady of one of UCLA's most effective and distinguished alumni, and a distinguished alumni, I believe, in her own right, Mrs. William E. Forbes. The First Lady of the UCLA Alumni Association, Mrs. Leslie Paulin. And evidently last, but certainly not the least in my life, my First Lady, Mrs. Judy Pettit, Mrs. Roger Pettit. We have with us also today many, many distinguished guests. I will not introduce them all. I will acknowledge that they are here from government service, from institutions, from other areas of great dedication to the problems of our time. I would like to acknowledge, however, some very special friends of UCLA on this 50th birthday party. Our own Dr. Ralph Bunch, our own Dr. Glenn T. Seaborg. Dr. Seaborg. Dr. Seaborg here. Regents of the university, and I know they will acknowledge the rationale for my introducing Dr. Bunch and Dr. Seaborg ahead of them and others. Age has some priorities still. Service does also. Let me introduce the regents as a group, and when I have called all names, and I will acknowledge to the regents that I have called all of the names except those who are at the head table, will they please rise so that we may extend to them our warm birthday wishes for UCLA. Regent W. Glenn Campbell, Regent John E. Cannaday, Regent Edward W. Carter, Mrs. Edwin H. Heller, Mr. Edwin W. Pauley, Regent Edwin W. Pauley, Regent Norton Simon, and Regent William French Smith. Lady and gentlemen, former regents of the university that we all welcome here today, again alphabetically. Former regents Robert Alschuler, Edmund G. Brown, W. Thomas Davis, Judge Victor Hanson, Preston Hotchkiss, Judge Frederick Hauser, and John V. Vaughn. Gentlemen, chancellors of this great university, Messrs. Daniel G. Aldrich, Vernon I. Cheadle, and Dean E. McHenry, will you please let us acknowledge you? UCLA past chancellors and interim chief executive officers. Certainly we want to acknowledge them on UCLA's 50th birthday. Paul A. Dodd, Stafford Warren, Vern O. Knudsen, Raymond B. Allen, and Franklin D. Murphy. Gentlemen, so much for the preliminary remarks. You may now go, and introductions. You may now go forward with your in the event there's any question in anyone's mind, those who are receiving honorary degrees will be acknowledged later in the program. You may now go forward with your lunch. Thank you very much.
We're going to go way out there.
Dutch is going. He will, as chairman of the Board of Regents.
Marshall. Patty, Lee, can you roll in this? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the University for the conferring of honorary degrees. In public recognition of merit and distinction, the university wishes to confer honorary membership upon 5 individuals who have been recommended for the degrees by a committee of the faculty, by the president, and by the regents of the university.
Mr. President, I have the honor to present Harold Brown.
Harold Brown, brilliant and inventive physicist, you have contributed significantly to your country's defense. Scientific advisor and consultant to the government of the United States, you have aided the cause of peaceful understanding among the nations of the world. Gifted administrator, your talents are now enlisted in service to academic science as president of a distinguished sister institution, the California Institute of Technology. Wise, witty, and articulate friend and partner in California higher education, I welcome you to honorary membership in this university. By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Regents of the University of California, I confer upon you the honorary degree Doctor of Laws with all the rights and privileges thereto pertaining.
Mr. President, I have the honor to present Dorothy Buffum Chandler.
Dorothy Buffum Chandler, 14 years a regent of the University of California, devoted to the lofty aims and goals of all higher education, effective patron of the arts, where your influence has been felt throughout the length and breadth of this state, lover of beauty in its rich and diverse forms, newspaper executive with an abiding concern for the community. With our hearts and our minds, we salute your many achievements and confer upon you our highest honor. By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Regents of the University of California, I confer upon you the honorary degree Doctor of Humane Letters with all the rights and privileges thereto pertaining.
Mr. President, I have the honor to present Robert Hutchison Finch.
Robert Hutchison Finch, former Lieutenant Governor of California and Regent of the University. You have distinguished yourself by bringing the resources of the state to bear on the vast complex of urban problems. Now, as Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare, you are demonstrating the same concern on a national scale. A political advisor at the highest levels of government, you are a pragmatist, distrustful of easy solutions and sensitive to human needs. For your past achievements, present attainments, and future promise, we take pride in saluting you as an honorary alumnus of the University of California. By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Regents of the University of California, I confer upon you the honorary degree Doctor of Laws with all the rights and privileges thereto pertaining.
Mr. President, I have the honor to present Daniel Patrick Moynihan.
Daniel Patrick Moynihan, sociologist and author who has become one of America's most articulate authorities on urban and ethnic problems. Educator who has served with distinction as director of the nation's foremost Center for Urban Studies. Public servant, consultant, government official, now assistant to the President of the United States. Yours is a life combining a love for humanity with the conceptual skill required to understand and hopefully to solve the urgent problems of the city. And we salute you today with gratitude and respect. By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Regents of the University of California, I confer upon you the honorary degree Doctor of Laws with all the rights and privileges thereto pertaining.
Mr. President, I have the honor to present Arthur Rubinstein.
Arthur Rubinstein, brilliant concert pianist. For nearly 7 decades, you have enchanted music lovers throughout the world. A compelling virtuoso, you are acclaimed alike for sumptuous tone and flawless technique. Sensitive interpreter of Chopin, Brahms, Mozart, and other master composers, you have opened to us new and exciting vistas of musical enjoyment. Yours is a full and rewarding life, one to delight the emotions and the imagination. And we are proud to add honorary membership in the University of California to the rich harvest of your academic and musical honors. By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Regents of the University of California, I confer upon you the honorary degree Doctor of Fine Arts with all the rights and privileges thereto pertaining.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me suggest, in order to perhaps lift some of the solemnity of this occasion and the importance of the awarding of the degrees which has just been completed, that we bear in mind what I consider to be 2 really indispensable characteristics of all of us today. One is that we must have an excellent sense of humor, and secondly, we must be incorrigible optimists. So, I am certain that Chancellor Young, having gone forward with his inauguration, is indeed an incorrigible optimist. We now come to the main program that was originally scheduled for you, and I hope in part for your entertainment, and I hope in part for if not totally, for the entertainment of Sue and Charles Young. To present greetings to Sue and Chuck Young, let me start with this. Some 12 years before the birth of UCLA, Regent DeWitt Higgs was born in Soldier, Idaho. And to coin a phrase, he has indeed been a soldier. A distinguished member of the State Bar of California, he has chaired or been the president of virtually every civic, professional, and public service organization to which he has ever belonged. He knows where the action is, and that's why he's chairman of the Board of Regents, and that's also why he's here today. On behalf of the Regents and the people of the state of California, Regent DeWitt Higgs. Well, you see, that's what happens when you change horses or change programs or whatever you do. It was my understanding that all of the 11 people here were going to remain here. Obviously, my understanding was incorrect. We could, Mr. President, with your permission, we could go forward and then we could come back.
Roger, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, that must be proof to you that the University of California is in poor hands at the moment. In behalf of the Regents of the University of California and all of the people of California, I extend greetings. In spite of the tenseness of our times, in spite of confrontation and counter-confrontation, I have hope and faith in the future of this great university. It gives me great comfort to have UCLA in the hands of Chuck Young, a man big, physically, mentally, and morally. It gives me great faith to have Charlie Hitch at the head of the University of California. It also gives me comfort to have Bob Finch back in Washington. And above all, it gives me comfort to have all of the friends of the university that I see out there supporting us in this time of need. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Regent Higgs. It's clear to all of us now that all educational institutions of distinction are being assaulted from without and occasionally from within. And the University of California is clearly one of the most distinguished. In that context, how fortunate we are that he is president of this great university. A fellow of Queen's College at Oxford for 13 years, a head of the Research Council at Rand Corporation for 13 years. He has only 11 and a half more years to go as president of the University of California. On behalf of the university administration and several campuses, President Charles J. Hitch.
Mr. Chairman, I can't make it. It's scarcely legal. I want to say how happy I am to be here to take part in these ceremonies. As some of you may recall, today marks the first anniversary of my own inauguration here at UCLA last year. I'm going to be very brief. I know you've heard at least enough from me today, I just want to say that the University of California is very fortunate to have Chuck Young as Chancellor of this campus, and I am proud to have had a part in his inauguration.
Thank you, Mr. President. Seems to me this business of higher education to be really effective and distinguished, and to keep it moving and open to all qualified persons in a rapidly changing society and environment, requires the same kind of excellence and professional competence by administrators as it does by faculty. We recognize that. That's why we're here. Certainly UCLA has been gifted by and is profited handsomely by such a partnership. One of the valued members of that partnership I present to you now, speaking for the UCLA administration and the non-academic staff at UCLA, Vice Chancellor for Administration, Dr. James W. Hobson.
Thank you, Roger. It's my distinct pleasure to speak in behalf of the administrative staff and the non-academic employees of UCLA, some in number over 10,000, and to convey to you, Mr. Chancellor, their congratulations on the assumption of your office. Flexibility, soundness of thought, and the ability to translate into action are attributes that any employer expects from his employees. By example, our Chancellor has really shown the way. Simply, Chuck, I'd like to say for the administrative staff, all of the non-academic employees of UCLA, we're solidly behind you and pledge to work together with you on realizing the goals of constantly improving the quality of our institution.
Thank you, Jim, very much. Going forward with the same basic theme of this excellence of professional competence in both faculty and administration, each dependent upon and supporting the other, I'm very pleased to present to you now, on behalf of the faculty and institutional delegates here today, a distinguished professor of mathematics, a man who is a good friend of mine with the others whom I've introduced here today, a man who's been known occasionally, however, to entertain his friends with card tricks, the chairman of the UCLA Academic Senate, Dr. Lowell J. Page.
Thank you, Roger. Things change a little bit faster than even I can keep up with. And I have a speech which I changed from my original one, but now the loss of a few members, well, no, they're back now, so I guess I can return to it. Secretary Finch, President Hitch, Chancellor Young, honored guests, regents, fellow faculty members, institutional delegates, and friends of UCLA. Chuck, on behalf of the faculty, I wish to extend to you the best of greetings. And after the events of the last few days, I decided I would trim my original remarks. Many of the faculty have little chance to see the tremendous amount of time and energy that you devote to this university. I have. Chancellor Young, you have indicated in your early address the task which lies ahead for all of us, and I wish to say to you that the faculty at UCLA will join you in this endeavor with dedication and full devotion. we're proud that Chancellor Young is our Chancellor and Sue our First Lady. As a matter of fact, with a little bit of less solemnity than that, I will say that I received a call the other day from a large university which was looking for a president, and they asked me about Chuck. And I'm not known for the most articulate words in the world, but my reply was, "You keep your cotton-picking hands off our Chancellor."
Lowell, hear, hear. It would seem that all college and university students have a great deal to say today. Certainly, the students don't have a corner on the market in that regard, however. But be that as it may, much, in my judgment, of what the students have to say, including the 29,000 or so at UCLA, is worth listening to and worth responding to. One UCLA student in particular, who has been somewhat garrulous in this regard, and what he has had to say is also worth listening and responding to. He's 23 years old. He's a Los Angeles Mexican-American, a member of the United Mexican-American Students Association. He will receive his bachelor's degree in history this June from UCLA and plans to go to law school. He has been, I think, one of the principal architects of responsible student participation at UCLA. He's the outgoing ASUCLA president. On behalf of the students at UCLA, for a special presentation to Chancellor Young, I am proud to present to you Rosalio Munoz.
Thank you, Roger. I'm very pleased on behalf of the students to be here to congratulate the Chancellor. And I'd like very much to say that one of the things that students have had to say for the past few years is that people are saying too much and doing too little. And one of the men on this campus who's willing to stop just talking theoretically and say, let's get down and do something, has been our new Chancellor, Charles Young. And I'm very happy to see him now as our Chancellor. Earlier in the morning, Chuck, you mentioned that you were willing to go ahead to do new programs and to get some things going here at UCLA and at universities throughout the country. And I would like to present to you, on behalf of the Associated Students of UCLA and the UCLA Foundation, a check for $5,000 for Chancellor's discretionary fund to get as seed money for some of those new programs, and I hope to see him coming soon.
Thank you, Ross. Very well said. I suppose we could all speculate on whether or not it's true that for every great man there's a great woman, or whether that woman, if she exists, stands in a particular relationship to a particular great man. I spoke to you a moment ago about the partnership here at UCLA. I think this program would not be complete unless I also spoke to you very clearly about the partnership in the Young family. Beside Chancellor Young stands a great woman, in my view, Sue Young. She is young and beautiful and charming and sophisticated and bright and articulate. She'll never put me down again, figuratively. She entertains graciously and warmly. And this brings me to the point of this presentation, which is that Capricorn women, so I read, do in fact entertain graciously and warmly. Although we have enormous personal confidence, Sue, in you and in your ability, we know and we recognize that you, on occasion, have analyzed people on the basis of their astrological signs. We know that Capricorn women are inclined to do that also. Seemed to us that under these circumstances, a crystal ball might be an appropriate presentation to you, might assist you in charting the young family course, and it's entirely possible, Chuck, that you might find some use for this from time to time. In our efforts to find a suitable crystal ball, we were determined to put in it something that would be commemorative of this event. We didn't find a collector's item, but we did find, through an ingenious fellow who, with the superb counsel of Malou Paulin, an acceptable facsimile. And Sue, I present to you now this crystal ball, if you will be generous in your appraisal of it, which has inside it a gold medallion. On one side it bears the UCLA Alumni Association seal, and on the other side it says, Inauguration, Charles Edward Young, Chancellor, UCLA, May 23, 1969, on the occasion of UCLA's 50th anniversary. With our best wishes to you both. To quote from his citation for Alumnus of the Year in 1967, and I do quote, "Few men have been more closely allied with UCLA during the past 40 years than William E. Forbes," end of quotation. From the first editor of the Daily Bruin in 1927 to president of the Alumni Association and ex officio regent of the university in 1960 and 1961, and an appointive regent in 1962. He has many years remaining in which he will continue to serve the university with great distinction and dedication. Representing the past, the present, and the future, on behalf of the Alumni Association, I am proud to present Mr. William E. Forbes.
Thank you, Regent Pettit. And as I refer to Roger, I should like to take this moment to express to UCLA alumni that they have had a most devoted, competent, articulate representative on the board these past 2 years. We will miss you very much in July, Roger. Secretary Finch, President Hitch, Chancellor Young, honored guests, fellow regents, friends of UCLA. The program planners mercifully set aside but a brief time for this presentation, so you will be spared a detailed comment on the early days of UCLA. Many of us here this afternoon knew all of UCLA's administrators, Moore, Hedrick, Dykstra, Allen, Knudsen, Murphy. And all, I am sure, join me in saluting their great contributions. Two names I add, those of Edward A. Dixon, Charles H. Reber, for they too, as others, are an indelible part of UCLA's brief but illustrious history. As these 50 years have passed, the numbers at UCLA have increased exponentially, as Franklin Murphy might say. Students, faculty, administrators, alumni, and it is this last group, the alumni, that I represent to give to Chancellor Young a token of our appreciation for his service to UCLA to date and our pledge of support to him in the days ahead that seem destined to be difficult because of a troubled world, an unhappy society, and the ferment of the campus. On the top of this hourglass is the seal of the UCLA Alumni Association. On the bottom are these words of dedication. Inauguration, Charles Edward Young, Chancellor UCLA, May 23rd, 1969, on the occasion of UCLA's 50th anniversary. Let this measure of time symbolize your heritage, Chancellor Young. The cadence of these tiny grains of sand will provide time for reflection, indeed, if you can find an occasional hour. Take comfort, if you will, Charles, in the knowledge that those of us who are truly members of the UCLA family comprehend the complexities of your responsibility and will give you the support you must have to succeed, and succeed you will. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Bill, very much. A great deal has been said here today from the hearts of the members of the university and especially the members of the UCLA family, dedicated to two great members of that family, Sue and Charles Young. Very nearly enough has been said, it would seem, for this occasion. So if you will all rise with me with your glasses in hand. Symbolic of all the greetings and presentations which have been expressed here today, and on behalf of those who have expressed them, Sue and Charles Young, we do indeed salute you. Mr. Chancellor.
Thank you. I believe that Roger's words were not accidental, but well chosen when he said he thought enough had been said here today. Some little more remains to be said, but not a great deal. First, I would like to introduce to you the members of my family who are here. My mother, Mrs. Eula Young. And my cousins, Mr. and Mrs. Thomas Walters. Secondly, I would like to thank everyone for the presentations. One of them I understand very well, the $5,000 check. I think I can find something to do with it. The problem is that there will be so much advice as to what to do that it may take many months for anything to be accomplished. The second I understand reasonably well, because I know of my wife's avocation and passing interest, at least, in astrology. The third I find a bit more puzzling. It was indicated earlier that Charlie Hitch had 11 and a half years yet to go as president of the University of California. I think this may be an indication that my time should be reckoned in hours. I know indeed that I live from hour to hour a good bit of the time. In addition to the thanks for the comments that have been made here today and the presentations, I want to thank every one of you who is here, who has helped make this such a remarkable day, and a day which means so much to Sue and me both. Sitting on the platform at this table, as I have been doing, I've had the opportunity to look about the room, and it is quite obvious that this is a gathering of great and dear friends, and that is something that we very much appreciate. Thanks to all of you, and I hope that we will all together be able to do the job that you are all expecting and have every right to deserve. Thank you.
Happy birthday to UCLA. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you for coming.